Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, December 6th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at Maryland's congressional district map that has been proposed by the Democratic supermajority that looks like it might actually follow through, giving the Democratic Party 7 out of 8 seats in the state of Maryland, with one congressional district having a partisan lean of Republican plus 8. Now, the reason why I bring up this map is because it has been long, at least seemed to be, a foregone deal that the Democratic Party was going to make a map that was 8-0 in favor of the Democratic Party, giving them full and total control over the congressional districts in the state of Maryland. And it was a map that was expected to be drawn in a much more beneficial way for Democrats, even compared to this one. But instead of receiving a map that would be more along the lines of this one, giving the Democratic Party the lean and advantage in 7 districts, with the Republicans having a +1 partisan lean in the 1st congressional district, instead, Democrats decide to roll with this proposed map. Now, it's not a finalized map, but it is one that is closer to a reality than an 8-0 map for the Democratic Party. And people actually on the Democratic side cite the incumbents that want to keep themselves within a non-competitive primary. And we'll talk about how that ultimately might be screwing the Democratic Party out of an additional seat. Now, I say screwing them out of an additional seat under the assumption that they were gerrymandering and are to gerrymander a state. And I do not condone gerrymandering. But what I am saying is that Democrats, for a long time, for the past 10 years, have seen this as an opportunity that eventually they would be able to draw out the Freedom Caucus member, Representative Andy Harris, a very staunch conservative, a very big Republican, and someone who has been a pain in the Democratic Party for quite some time now. And the fact that he comes from Maryland, a state where Democrats have full and total control over the redistricting process, and ultimately they are expecting to keep him in this map. Now, it's not as good as it used to be for the Republicans. In 2018, the state of Maryland had 7 Democrats and 1 Republican, just as it does now. And taking a look at Andy Harris's district, keep in mind this is the 2018 result, in which the Democratic popular vote victory was 8 points nationwide. Maryland's 1st congressional district still went to Andy Harris by a margin of 22 percentage points. The Republican Party was given a district in 2010 for a reason. They were actually drawn out into 2 districts. There were 2 Republican districts at the time. But ultimately, they ended up going to the Democratic Party in those next coming elections. But even in 2018, the Democratic Party simply could not crack Maryland's 1st congressional district and could not get a representative there. Fast forward to 2020, and Maryland's 1st goes to Andy Harris, the incumbent, by a margin of nearly 30 points across the district. The main takeaway here is that Andy Harris was solid every single election. Republicans are solid always in the 1st congressional district. And Democrats actually are not necessarily against gerrymandering at all. In fact, Maryland, I think, is one of the perfect examples of how Democrats have gerrymandered this state into oblivion. Now, I preface this by saying that I am from the state of Maryland. I am from Steny Hoyer's 5th congressional district here. Ultimately, there was never really a competitive nature to Steny Hoyer's race besides the time that Larry Hogan ran, and even then, Steny Hoyer won by a margin of 10 points. But the 5th district seems gerrymandered, but it gets so much worse than this. The neighboring 4th district with Representative Anthony Brown, he ran for governor in 2014 and lost to Larry Hogan. Look at his district. And if it couldn't get even worse, the neighboring 3rd congressional district is so much worse. Take a look at this map. The outline in black represents the 3rd congressional district from the state of Maryland, an absolutely egregious gerrymander. Because to be quite honest with you, if you take a look at the county-wide map in the state of Maryland, you will find that between Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Baltimore, you have Republican intersections far and near between. And, of course, there are a few examples of some, new blue districts, such as Frederick County, or new blue areas, such as Frederick County, Anne Arundel County, voting for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden after voting for McCain and Romney. Looking at this 3rd district, though, looking at all of these districts, we know they have been gerrymandered for a reason. Take a look at the 2nd district, right? Crazy. Some parts of it don't even connect, do not even connect. So when you see this, recognize that the Democratic Party is not against gerrymandering their state. So looking at this new map, the one that people expect to go through, and there is some possibility of contention, but people acknowledge, Democrats could go 8-0, the same way that Democrats do in the state of Massachusetts, or really in this northeastern region. Take a look. Every single congressional district in the Northeast, right up here, or at least the New England area, is blue. And it could be because of gerrymandering. It could also be because of a number of other things. In Massachusetts, it's a state where the Republican Party routinely gets about a third of the vote, yet they do not have a single representative. Now, to draw a Republican district in Massachusetts, to be fair, you would have to gerrymander it in favor of the Republican Party. That is not the case in the state of Maryland. But people point this out as an issue because Maryland and Massachusetts are both just as partisan leaning. And at this point in time, Democrats actually might be making it more difficult for themselves in 2022 and future elections by not drawing this district in a more Democratic fashion. And again, it comes down to this issue of incumbency advantage. Now, taking a look at where Steny Hoyer's district is now, compare this to the old map. Before, it would hit parts leading all the way into Annapolis and getting parts of Annapolis, the state's capital. Now, with that, Steny Hoyer would have had, and did have, some primary challengers, but there was never really a formidable force against him because the 4th congressional district was drawn in a way that it was taking a big portion of these people that would consider primarying Steny Hoyer. And ultimately, in this new district, it makes it easier for him to remain as an incumbent and ultimately puts him in a more beneficial voting group for Steny Hoyer himself. And looking at it, it's still a Democratic district, but in fact, I personally am drawn out of his congressional district now. And that could be because he is afraid potentially of a primary challenger, or it could be for a number of other reasons. But the point being that instead of going forth with an 8-0 map like this, in which some of the districts would be relatively unchanged, they are moving forward with a map like this, where Andy Harris gets a Republican +8 partisan lead. Now, keep in mind that's compared to the rest of the nation. The rest of the nation in the 2020 election voted for Biden by a margin of 5 points. So when you see that Republican +8 partisan lead, know that it's about 13 points from the center on the national map. But in this proposed one that was tabled, which means it's probably not going to be considered. It's really probably not going to go through because it groups in all of Annapolis with a Republican representative. But ultimately, you are seeing the parts of Ocean City connected all the way 4 hours away to these parts of Anne Arundel County. Ultimately, you are looking at a new congressional district that is not going to be beneficial for the GOP, but instead Democrats are opting for this one to save their own incumbents, I think, from potential primary challengers, which is a whole other discussion that we can definitely get into future videos because you see that in a number of other states. But again, the reason why I think the Democrats were also expecting Maryland to prop them up one is because they have been pushed down in a number of other states. The most egregious and insane gerrymander I have seen of this election cycle is not from Maryland, is not from even Illinois, which has 14 Democrats and 3 Republicans under their new map, but instead comes from the state of Ohio, in which the Republican Party drew these maps. Now, a bit of a flashback. In the state of Ohio, the Democratic Party routinely gets about 45, 46, 47% of the vote. On occasion, they win a race. For instance, 3 years ago, they won a Senate election with Sherrod Brown in 2018. With that amount of the vote, you would expect maybe they would get less than half of the congressional districts, but somewhere around there. In this new map that has been confirmed, has been put forth for 2022, here's how it looks. On the old map, at least, the Democratic Party had 3 solid districts, and they also had an advantage in a district with a partisan lean like even. Now, taking a look, sorry about that, I don't know what that was, taking a look at our new map, you see that the Democratic Party only has 2 solid seats, one in the 11th district and one in the 3rd district, and even that one incumbent, Marcy Kaptur, is now in a Republican lean of +8, and Tim Ryan is drawn in a district that has a partisan lean of Republican +26. Even these 2 swing districts have Republican incumbents and have Republican partisan leans. So, in an essence, in a nutshell, the Democratic Party, a party that gets 45, 46, 47% of the vote in Ohio, will only get 13% in terms of total representation from the state of Ohio. 13%. How insane is that? Think about that for just a moment. So Democrats want other Democratic states to retaliate with maps of this nature. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen in the state of Maryland. And while it may seem inconsequential, because it is a singular congressional district that we are in discussion here, Maryland's first, that might or might not be drawn in a more beneficial way for the Democratic Party, which signs seem to be pointing to the no, it will not be drawn in a more beneficial way. The point is, though, one district might make all the difference. Because in our 2020 House elections, you see that the Democratic Party was only able to win 222 seats across the nation. Republicans have 213. That means Democrats have a majority over those needed to control by 4. A 4-seat majority over the required number. Isn't that crazy to think about? 4 seats out of 435 total seats. 4 seats could be the difference between Republicans in the advantage and Democrats in the advantage. So yes, every single district matters. And with over a third of all states finalizing their new congressional districts for the 2022 midterm elections and through 2030 until the next census year, you can see that in the change from old maps, that the numbers changing are not drastic at all. Plus 6 Democratic-leaning seats, plus 2 Republican-leaning seats, minus 5 highly competitive seats. The changes here may seem inconsequential on a singular state basis, but make all the difference at the end of it. So what you see here is ultimately the Democratic Party and the Republican Party fighting for singular advancements, fighting for new gains. Even though Ohio might have been an egregious gerrymander, ultimately it only gives the GOP 2 additional seats. Just 2, when Democrats are only getting 13% in terms of total representation. So in the state of Maryland, that could be counteracted with a map of this nature, in which Democrats in a normal type of year would win that first congressional district. But in 2022 might not, but in a future election very easily could. But they certainly couldn't back in 2018. So it could make up for some of the losses that the GOP is putting forth for the Democratic Party. And that's why, you are going to see every single district so heavily fought for, so heavily in contention, because Democrats and Republicans know this is just going to be incremental. After Texas confirmed their electoral map, Republicans lost their biggest state that they could take a look at and try to gerrymander. And they did. They did gerrymander, absolutely. But they did not take away any Democratic districts. You can see that they actually solidified many of the Democratic Party. But they knew that in the old map, there was a very real possibility that sometime in the future, Democrats would be able to win the majority of seats from the state of Texas. In this new map, it's not even possible until maybe 2026, 2028, probably. And by that point, 2 years later, the GOP just has to draw them again in a less beneficial way for the Democratic Party, just as they did in this election. But it's every single district. In the state of Oklahoma, I think this one is probably the most comparable to the state of Maryland. And I say this because both of these states are extremely partisan states. Oklahoma votes for Trump plus 30, Biden wins Maryland by 30. Looking at the maps in the older map, there was one district in which the opposition party held and actually won back in 2018. They lost it in 2020, but it was the 5th congressional district that nobody could have foreseen as being competitive. In fact, on this map here, it's not even on the Dem-favored, toss-up, or Rep-favored column because it was considered to be safe Republican. But Kendra Horn ended up winning it. And then fast forward to 2020, as the incumbent did not perform nearly as bad as Republicans thought she would. Considering the national environment, considering the fact that the GOP flipped 15 seats, Oklahoma's 5th being one of them, they only won by less than 5 points. This district in Oklahoma, in a state where Trump won every single county, I kid you not, should not have had the possibility of a Democrat winning there. But ultimately, a Democrat did win there in 2018 and almost did in 2020 again. So, what did the Republican Party do? They took the state of Oklahoma, and they did what Democrats seem to be not willing to do in the state of Maryland. And they drew what was a Republican lean of 11 in that partisan seat and made it now a Republican plus 24 lean, which means that in any type of normal year, it would take way more than what it took in 2018 to flip the 5th district. They effectively cut out any possibility of a Democrat representing Oklahoma. And that's what many national Democrats want Maryland to do for the GOP. Again, I am never one to condone gerrymandering or try to say that this is the way that they should go. But if you're talking about a political standpoint, I think many Democrats are disappointed and are in a way giving up an opportunity to add an additional seat in a year that's going to be so heavily contentious where every single seat will matter. Again, I don't think they should do it. But if you're talking about it from a political standpoint, I think that, they have already proven in states such as Illinois that they are willing to fight fire with fire in response to maps such as Ohio, such as Texas, even such as Oklahoma, where they are drawing out competitive districts intentionally. I think the Democrats truly want to have the biggest advantage for 2022. And, if I was up there being a national Democrat and I was saying, draw these maps in any way that you can to be beneficial, because no matter what, the GOP is going to do it, and the same thing can apply for the GOP. The Democratic Party is going to do it. No matter what, I think that would have been a call that would have been easily made, but it doesn't seem to be an easy call for Maryland Democrats, and it doesn't look like that's what they're going to follow through with for 2022 through 2030. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. That's a lot of years that I just got out there. Make sure you comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my redistricting election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.